Alright, welcome back. Let's continue building this thing. As you can see there, my soldering iron is heating up. Over here we have the guest of honor, the pick guard that we're working on. As you can see, the pickups are all in it, and it is ready for the other parts. Now, I had to wait for them to come in the mail because I had to order them online. But I found some really good deals on eBay, and I now have all the parts that I need. There they are right there, all laid out, as well as the tools that I will need and my solder. Now, one thing that was a question was wire to connect all these controls together and all of that stuff. The pickups have their own wires, everything else doesn't. Enter an old Ethernet cable. If you don't know what an Ethernet cable is, this is how we connected to the internet before there was Wi-Fi. We actually had to physically plug the computer into the modem. Can you imagine that? And you were bound by the length of the cord. How gauche is that? Anyway, since we don't use these anymore, and since the wire is the perfect size, I will be using this. So let's get started. For the wiring layout, I'm using this diagram right here, which I got from bigcommerce.com. It was free, don't worry about it, but I am giving them credit for it because it is a very well done diagram. It shows where everything is. It's nice and big. All of the lines here are very clear as to where they go and what they do. Now, I had seen another diagram that actually had two capacitors, one on each tone control. That seems like overkill to me, and it seems unnecessary unless you want two different capacitor values, which I don't. So, this diagram shows how to do it with only one capacitor, and that's what I'm going to be doing. So, no more talk, let's get going. Okay, step one is going to be to install the switch. Now, I was looking at one tutorial, and it said, put the side with the spring furthest away from the pickups. This doesn't have a spring. But I'm pretty sure he means this side so that all these lugs are toward the pickups. So we'll put it in this way. Like that. Alright, now we have the screws here, and we will get those out. Oh, I have two different, this is neat. I have two different color ends that I can put on it, a black one and a white one. No gold. How very uncouth. Alright. Now, fortunately, these things are fairly standardized, so most any switch can fit on most any pick guard. These holes are just a little bit, just ever so slightly off, but they're doable. So we will go ahead, tighten these up. Once upon a time, I would have been using a power screwdriver, and I probably would have driven it down too far and cracked the plastic. I don't do that anymore. So, cracked plastic is not a good thing. That one's nice and snug, so we'll go over to this one. And, yeah, we'll just keep doing these things the old-fashioned way like this, because it's much nicer to the material. Alright. We'll get that put in there. Yeah. The switch is in. I'm not going to put the end on yet. Gee, I wonder why. So now it is time to put the controls in. Those guys right there. So we will begin, and these are all exactly alike. They're all the same value. They're all the same tolerance, and so it really doesn't matter which one goes where. So I'll start with what I expect to be probably the hardest one and work my way out. So let's do that. And we'll just grab one here. Yeah, these things are, these things have been around since, gosh, since the earliest days of electronics. They've gone by many names, variable resistor, potentiometer, rheostat, you name it, someone has called it that. Now, they have these little bumps here. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but we've got a little nub there that I'm going to have to clip off. Fortunately, I also brought my clippers with me, so we will snip this off of there like that, and then our device should sit flat against the pick guard like that. Okay, much better. So now here's the advantage of a clear guard. I can see which way I'm pointing these things, and it does matter. They need to be pointed more or less toward the switch, so we use as little wire as possible. The reason for that is because the more wire you have and the longer it is, the more potential signal degrading you have. All wire, no matter how good quality it is or what metal it's made of, resists a certain amount of electricity. It's physics. And there's nothing we can do about it. So the less wire, the better. And thus, we put these so that everything is as close to the switch as possible, and that way we use as little wire as possible and have as little signal degradation as possible. That one almost hit me in the eye. I'm going to have to be more careful about that. All right, here we go. We'll put this one in, and we will put the nut and washer on. I said we'll put it on. I didn't say we'll chase it across the surface. Sometimes they don't listen. That's when you really got to put your foot down and say, I'm going to get the wrench. All right, that's two. And we'll put the third one in here. Snip off the little nub. Point it somewhere besides my face this time. This one is going to need to turn this way a little bit. So we have them all basically facing as close to the switch as they can. Run that down there. Tighten it up. And there we are. We have all the hardware installed here. Now we just got to hook it all together. All right, happily I discovered something important before I started trying to solder and stunk up the place. These potentiometers have plastic caps over them, like this. So I got to get those off of there before I can do any soldering. I'm probably going to want to take a file or a Dremel and rough up that metal a little bit too, just to make sure solder will stick to it. But I'll worry about that off camera. Okay, let's get to soldering. According to the diagram, the neck pickup goes on this third lug here. So let's start by fastening it down. Now, you may notice some interesting things about these wires. Yeah, the length that I had here wasn't sufficient to put this here and this there. So I had to peel it a bit more. And this wire is so delicate that it seemed like it took forever, and I had to throw away a bit of wire, because if I did more than just lay the edge of my X-Acto knife on the insulation, it would cut both the insulation and the wire. That is not what I needed. So a couple of these things are just a mite shorter than they started out being. So we'll snip off the excess here. I'm going to do this stuff later because, yeah, everything, pretty much everything in the whole thing, all the grounds, solder right to that thing. So I will just do them all at once, because that is going to take some time, and it's going to take a fair bit of solder too. Okay, the middle pickup goes onto this lug right here. Now, this middle pickup, the single coil one, yeah, the ends of these wires are already tinned. If you don't know what that is, that's basically, it's running a little bit of solder into the wire so it is ready to receive more. Kind of like that. Boy, you gotta love fresh materials. It is so much easier than working with used stuff. So, that just leaves the bridge pickup. Now, this one, when I peeled it, yeah, it came out just a mite unusual. We got a mile of length here and just a little bit here. But it will work. And so, that's what counts. And it goes right here. I need to twist these wires up a little bit more, because, yeah, they tend to look like your hair first thing in the morning, basically. So we have to get them combed and brushed and shaved and all that good stuff, and then we can solder it into position. When I think of all the years I went without a soldering iron that had a light on it, too, I wonder what I was thinking. All right, the 3 pickups are in place. So I'll do the ground off screen, because that will take some time just sitting there trying to heat things up. And honestly, that's boring. So we'll do that somewhere else at another time. Right now, let's get some wire and do the rest of this. The next thing this diagram shows is a jumper wire going from this lug to this one. Yeah, the diagram shows it in blue, and I just happen to have a blue wire from my Ethernet cable, so let's do it. There we go. That one, and that one. Okay, we got a stray wire there. I will clip that off later. But we're good and solid. That's that. Now, next, it shows another wire going from this lug down to the volume control. That means I got to get that thing out of the way, and I got to get that thing out of the way. All right, so let's go ahead and make that wire. And here we go. So I'm going to slip this wire through there. You may notice I leave a lot of excess that I have to trim off later, but you know, I find that it is so much easier to get the wires through there, especially with my progressive bifocal eyes that it's just easier for me to do it that way. So now if I can get this wire into the solder, I said there we go. Okay, now it's good and solid. Alright, let's go ahead and snip off that little hanger on there. Yes, there's always groupies. Sometimes you got to get rid of them. And then this one is going to go down here to the volume control, because that is our primary output line from all of our pickups, whichever ones the switch may have us on at the time. Presumably we determine that, and the switch doesn't determine it on its own. If it does, you may want to call an exorcist. Alright, I'm going to tin the tip of this wire just a little bit because it is really being stubborn about going through there. So, let's try a little friendly persuasion here. You may notice how much my hands shake. Yeah. Is it frustrating? You don't know the half of it. But, you know what? Doing this stuff is just so enjoyable that it's worth the frustration to me. Honestly. So, and it may be hard for some to comprehend, but I learned how to handle a soldering iron like this in 8th grade. That wire is not cooperating. I've talked before about our electronics club. At that time, I was talking mostly about the fact that there was a girl in it, and she was doing very well and enjoying it, and the other girls shamed her out of it because that wasn't ladylike. I personally wanted to go around and get in each of their faces and explain to them just how shallow they were. But I never got the chance, which is probably a good thing. Okay, we got... This wire is so delicate. It breaks if you look at it. I mean, it's just... So... We still have a few stray... Oh, come on, you. This thing is not cooperating. I'm sure you can see that. You've got plenty of solder on there, just need the wire to stick to it. Also need the solder to cool a little faster. That was most interesting. Alright. Now, I gotta show you something on this diagram. See, I'm the guy who always asks why. And in this case, I got a big one. Why does all this stuff have to solder to the case? after we bend one of these lugs back and solder it to the case. I get why we're grounding the case so we don't get buzz if we touch the bare knob without some kind of a cover over it. Likewise for the other two. But here's my question. Why can't we solder all the wires to that lug and then have just one wire going to the body? Why can't we do that? Why do we have to make this a gigantic gob here like we always see in these Stratocasters, instead of using this thing the way it was kind of intended to be used? So, since I've never gotten a good answer to that, I'm going to try it. And if it fails, then we'll all know why. Alright, as I suspected, I did have to rough up these surfaces with a grinder a little bit in order to get the solder to stick. So, right now, let's gather up all these grounds and see about putting them together. Alright, as you can see here, I got my grounds all twisted together, and I did wind up soldering them to there. I got the answer to my question as to why we do it this way instead of over here. Yeah, this isn't big enough. So that is the great esoteric answer to that question. Now, this lug here is going to go to our output jack, and I have no idea how long that wire needs to be, so I'll have to do that later. And then also, coming from here is going to be the wire that goes up and grounds the bridge. And I have no idea how long that needs to be either, so that also is going to have to wait. What I can do next is go ahead and hook up the tone controls. That is going to be quite interesting because it's been a long time since I handled a capacitor. But not to worry, I went ahead and I'd used the grinder on both of these also, so we'll be hooking our grounds together too. Okay, first we've got to put a jumper between here and there. So as you can see, I have it in place, and we'll go ahead and solder this end in. I'm not going to solder the other end yet because that's where my capacitor needs to go. So, stranded wire is so hard to work with, mainly because it dissipates heat so quickly. And so, by the time your solder is cooling, your wire has already cooled, and now the solder won't stick to it. So it gets to be a bit of a pain. And now contrast that with the alternative, which is solid wire. Solid wire is much more efficient. It breaks if you sneeze at it. There is no good way. There is no really good, super effective way to do this. We're stuck with either solid or stranded until we figure out some way to do all of this wirelessly. And if that day comes, when that day comes, yeah, I probably won't be around to see it, but I'll be in heaven cheering you guys on. So, all right. Let's get the capacitor. So I bought a packet of 3 capacitors of different values. Now, when I was looking up what values to use, yeah, it depends on who you talk to. People say this one gives warmer lows and that one gives cooler. This one gives a better back rub. I say, does it sound good to you? Does that sound like what you wanted? Then you use the right one. If it doesn't, then you didn't. Try a different one. That's why I got 3 of them, because just in case I don't like the way the sound is coming out, I can change it. Right now, I'm going to start with the smallest one. I frankly don't remember these values off the top of my head, and honestly, I'm feeling too lazy to go look them up, but I'm going to go with the smallest value first. So I do know that the values can be approximated based on their size. I've worked with these for a long time, and yes, as I've mentioned before, I'm the guy who's always asking why. I really wanted to know several things. Among them was you always hear, you know, we have to use microfarads as a measurement because a farad is impossibly large. But nobody would ever tell me what that meant. What the, you know, what is a farad? How is it measured? Well, what I learned was that basically all of these electrical and electronic values, volts, amps, ohms, farads, all of those things, yeah, they are all based on getting 1 amp of electricity through 1 ohm of resistance using 1 volt of push. A farad is supposed to be able to store 1 full amp at 1 volt. Now, we work with very, very small amounts. And so that's why we have to use microfarads, because we're not dealing with those astronomical amounts of electricity. Somebody estimated once that a 1 farad capacitor would roughly be the size of this room. And absolutely useless, because who needs to do something like that? I don't know anybody, do you? So that's the reason for the microfarad thing. Now, feel free to double check me and correct me on that, because I'm going from very distant memory. But I'm pretty sure that what I just gave you is accurate. So now I need to solder that to there, but I also need to put a wire from here over to there so it's all grounded. And I also need to put a wire from here to here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those, and then we'll solder them in. Okay, I've got my wire from here to there. I did wind up going there because that lug was being difficult, and so was the wire. I've got this one fastened over here, so I just need to tack down this and the capacitor, and we're done with this step. After this, the next step will be connecting the tone controls to the different lugs up here so they affect the pickups that they're supposed to. So this stuff, since I took a Dremel grinder actually, to the surfaces of these things, the solder is sticking to them nicely. It's amazing how well you can solder on actual metal and not some kind of phony baloney coating to make it pretty. Alright, let's make some wires and let's connect up the tone controls. So our first one, we're going with this one here. That wire is going to go up and it's going to connect to this lug right here, and that will be the tone control for the neck pickup. This will be the tone control for the middle pickup. As usual, we don't have one for the bridge pickup. Strats of standard issue strats don't do that. I'm not totally sure why, but like the man says, there it is. As I said, this stranded wire is so hard to work with. It just, I mean, it cools faster than everything else, so the solder doesn't like to stick to it. I was reading one tutorial about how to do this, and it said don't fill the lug with solder. And I said, why? That makes it much easier for it to grab onto the wire if it's grabbing it from all sides. So whenever possible, I violate that rule. And I make no apologies, because I soldered good. So, what I'm not so good at is poking these wires through here when the background is the same color as everything else. I'm having trouble with this, and I'm sure you can see that. I can't even see the wire right at the moment. There, it's through. Maybe part of the reason I can't see the wire is because there's not much of it. I'm going to need to peel some more of that, because that's the other problem with this tiny stranded wire. The little strands break and break and break and break and break and break. So I need to strip some more of this. I'm going to go ahead and cut that stuff off. But here's how I have to strip it. I can't use any pressure. I'm using my X-Acto knife because I can get more precision out of it than my stripper clip. I have to just lay it on there, no pressure at all, and then I roll the wire back and forth, and hopefully I cut the insulation without cutting the wire. Yeah, off screen I had a really fun time with some other wires for precisely that reason. So we'll twist it all together here, and now there's actually some wire that I can see, and I can go ahead and poke it through there and bend it over like that. Alright, let's go ahead and make it solid. Make it so, number one. Here we go, yeah. I always had a much better time soldering components to a circuit board than working with this open hookup wire like this. And my issues with stranded wire are the reason. Now, this one goes to that lug there. So, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use the brown and white that was twisted with that brown, just because it's there. And I have lots of it. So, anyway, yeah, when my dad died, I was living in a little spitwad town called Fairfield, Idaho. It's still there. I'd actually looked it up yesterday. They said they had a population of 300. I never found them, unless they were counting cattle as well as people. But that just outside of town, up in the hills, is Soldier Mountain ski area. If you've ever gone skiing in south central Idaho at the Soldier Mountain, you have probably gone through Fairfield to get there. If you noticed it, good on you. If you didn't, you're probably in the majority. At the time, the big industry in town was a sawmill. And most of my friends in town worked at the sawmill. It was basically the biggest employer in town, and everything kind of revolved around that. When I was looking at things up yesterday, it appears that the sawmill is gone now, which doesn't surprise me because, yeah, logging, there were major logging operations going on in the Sawtooth National Forest, which is in the mountains, which is in the Sawtooth Mountains up above Fairfield. And many people didn't like the deforestation that was going on. And so I wasn't surprised to see that the sawmill was gone. I lived there in 76, 77. And I supported myself with a little electronics repair shop. Basically fixing people's TVs, stereos. I would buy up old TVs, fix them up, and then sell them. And I didn't make a lot of money, but I kept body and soul together. So, and I enjoyed myself. My primary reason for being there was I was very active in the local community church. The pastor there had become sort of a mentor to me. David Gummets, wherever you are, thank you. He basically took me in as part of as part of his family, especially after my dad died. And yeah, he kept me from going off the deep end. So living there was a necessary step in my personal evolution, but that town, oh my word, there was no recreation. There was nothing for the kids to do. Well, let me take that back. When it was football season, the whole town went nuts. High school football was the big draw in that town. And now, they couldn't field a regular team, so the league they played in had 8-man teams. And I never understood how that was supposed to prepare these kids to go play college ball with full 11-player teams. And as far as I know, none of them ever did. Yeah, most of them, from what I could gather, once they graduated, they worked the farm for 2 years, then married their cousin. But yeah, hay farming was the big thing, because the Camas Prairie has a very interesting ecosystem. It's dryland farming. They don't irrigate. There is enough groundwater, and it's close enough to the surface that they could grow hay and other crops without having to irrigate. And so that was interesting. And when haying season came around, school was out, because the kids had to go help with the haying. So yeah, you talk about a throwback. That place was it. And very, very tight community. And there was one other person in town my age. So there was except for the pastor and his family, there was pretty much nobody for me to hang out with. I'm going to clean that up just because I got strands all over the place, and I don't like it. So, and if you got on somebody's bad side, you were on everybody's bad side. It was a very tight community, both for better and for worse. As I mentioned, I was basically an outsider from the very beginning. I was a weird age, and nobody really knew what I was about, including me. So I wasn't exactly popular in that town. Now the people at the church, they loved me for the same reason that people in a lot of churches have loved me, at least for a while, because I could do music. And I could do it very well. But the thing I've discovered about these little bitty churches like that is as long as you're useful, they're okay with you. But the moment you aren't useful, you're expendable. So, yeah. I'm sorry to say I have not attended a church service in about 2 years. Because, yeah, when the last one betrayed me, it kind of put me over the edge. I am a believer. I know who Jesus Christ is, and I know what he has done for me, but I have serious problems with some of his people. I find myself constantly having to tell folks, please don't judge Jesus by the company he keeps. And I usually like to add, just to ease the moment and to drive the point home, I like to add, because he's even willing to keep company with you. And that's the truth. If you don't know that, find somebody and ask them about it. Or drop me a note and ask me. Okay, I do believe we are finished with the wiring. Except for the output from there, and then the bridge wire, and then I'll have to ground the output jack too, but I can ground that to any of these. It doesn't have to be over here on the volume. So that is going to have to wait until I have the rest of the parts. My wife has been busily painting the body, and oh my, you guys are going to love it as much as I do. I mean, what she's come up with is absolutely incredible. But for now, let's take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and put the white one on, just because it might come closer to being compatible with the gold. What do you think? You know, I think you can see right through my work. No, I couldn't resist. I'll see you next time.